office bag, feeling the tiredness of the day pressing on his shoulders. His tie was loose, his shoes were slightly wet, and all he wanted was to reach home, change into comfortable clothes, and forget about the long hours he had just spent at work. But as he looked around the platform, his eyes caught something unusual. On the far bench, slightly hidden from the crowd, a girl sat with her head lowered. She was trying hard to hide her face, but it was clear she was crying. Her small hands clutched a bag close to her chest as if it was her only treasure. The sight made Armin pause. In a place where everyone was rushing, where people's eyes were glued to their phones or the arrival board, she stood out because of her silence and sadness. Armin hesitated. He was not the kind of person who often interfered in other people's matters. He was shy by nature, someone who usually kept his head down and minded his own business. Yet something about the way the girl sat there, trembling slightly, made his heart tug. It was not ordinary sadness, her tears seemed filled with fear and loneliness. He took a step toward her and then stopped, unsure of what to say. Maybe she wanted to be left alone. Maybe someone else would come for her. But as he looked closer, he noticed her clothes. She was not dressed like someone who lived on the streets. Her coat was fine, her shoes looked new, and the small bag she carried seemed expensive. She did not belong in the shadows of a subway station at this hour. Gathering courage, Armin walked toward her slowly. He cleared his throat gently, so she would not feel startled. "Excuse me," he said softly. "Are you okay?" The girl lifted her head slightly. Her eyes were red, her cheeks wet from tears. She looked at him as if she wanted to say something but could not find the words. For a long moment, silence hung between them, broken only by the sound of trains passing on the other side of the platform. Finally, in a voice so low that Armin almost missed it, she whispered, "Can I borrow your phone?" The request caught him off guard. In the city, people usually avoided borrowing things from strangers, and if anyone asked for a phone, it often raised suspicion. But there was no doubt in her tone. She asked not with the boldness of someone who wanted to take advantage but with the helplessness of someone with no other choice. Armin did not think twice. He slipped his phone out of his pocket and handed it to her. "Of course," he said. "Here." She took the phone carefully, almost as if it was a fragile object, and turned slightly away. Her fingers trembled as she dialed a number. Armin could hear the faint beeping of the line connecting, followed by a soft voice as she spoke. She kept her words brief, her tone broken with emotion. He could not understand everything she said, but he caught fragments. "I'm safe, don't worry. I just need some time." Then, after a pause, she ended the call quickly. The girl returned the phone with both hands, her eyes avoiding his. "Thank you," she murmured. Armin nodded, trying to smile, though curiosity stirred inside him. Who was she calling? Why was she alone here? But he did not want to pry. Still, as she picked up her bag and made a move to walk away, something inside him resisted. He could not just watch her vanish into the rainy night without knowing if she was all right. "Wait," he said gently. "Are you sure you're okay? It's late, the city isn't safe at this hour." The girl froze for a moment. Her back was turned to him, but he could see the stiffness in her shoulders. She did not answer immediately. Then, slowly, she faced him again, and he saw the uncertainty in her eyes. It was as if she wanted to trust him but wasn't sure if she should. Armin gave her a reassuring smile. "I'm not asking for details. But if you need to sit for a while or have some tea, there's a stall near the exit. You look like you could use something warm." For a second, she looked as if she might refuse. Her lips parted, then closed again. But finally, she nodded faintly. "Okay," she said in a small voice. Together they walked out of the station. The rain had slowed to a drizzle, and the air smelled fresh, carrying the scent of wet earth and pavement. The tea stall near the corner was a small one, run by an old man who knew many of the regulars. A yellow light bulb hung above, casting a soft glow that made the night less gloomy. Armin ordered 2 cups of tea, and they sat on a wooden bench nearby. The steam rose from the cups, and for a while, they just sat in silence. The girl wrapped her fingers around the cup, letting the warmth seep into her hands. Armin watched her carefully, but without pushing. He knew forcing her to speak would only make her withdraw more. Finally, she sighed softly and looked at him. "You must think I'm strange," she said. "Not at all," Armin replied. "Everyone has moments when they feel lost. You don't have to explain anything if you don't want to." Her eyes softened a little at his words, as if she found comfort in the fact that he wasn't demanding answers. For the first time, a small, almost invisible smile touched her lips, though it vanished quickly. The rain started again, tapping lightly on the tin roof of the stall. The old man hummed as he poured another pot of tea for other customers. The city noises blended into the background, and in that small corner, it felt like a quiet world just for the two of them. Armin did not know who she was, where she came from, or why she had been crying. All he knew was that she needed kindness, and sometimes kindness did not require explanations. It only required a simple act like lending a phone to a stranger in need. As they finished their tea, he noticed that her eyes no longer looked as heavy with tears. She still carried sadness, but now there was also a trace of relief. She had someone to sit with, someone who did not see her as a problem but simply as a person who needed care. That night, Armin walked her back to the subway entrance, making sure she knew the way. She thanked him once more before stepping onto the platform. He watched her disappear into the crowd, still wondering who she really was and why fate had placed her in his path. He had no idea that this small act of kindness, in the middle of a rainy evening, was the beginning of a story much bigger than he could imagine. The subway was quieter now. The usual rush had passed, and only a handful of late travelers moved along the platform. Armin leaned against one of the pillars, his eyes scanning the train schedule. He was still thinking about the girl he had just helped. He told himself that he had done enough. He had given her his phone, shared a cup of tea, and made sure she wasn't left alone in her sadness. That should have been the end of it. Yet, something about her remained in his mind. Her voice on the phone, the way she had clutched her bag, the way her eyes had avoided his whenever he asked if she was okay, it all made him feel that there was more to her story than she had let on. As he prepared to step onto the arriving train, he caught sight of her again. She was walking quickly along the opposite side of the platform, her bag swinging by her side, her head lowered as if she was afraid of being seen. She did not notice him, but he noticed her. Something in the way she moved told him she was running from something, not just walking. She disappeared up the stairs, and before he realized what he was doing, Armin followed. It wasn't curiosity alone, it was a sense of worry. He told himself he had no right to interfere in her life, but the city could be unforgiving, especially for someone so young and alone. When he reached the street above, he spotted her again under a flickering streetlight. She stood there for a moment, holding her bag tighter, then took out a small piece of paper and checked it before walking toward a payphone booth at the corner. The booth was old, the kind few people used anymore, and she stepped inside quickly, shutting the glass door behind her. From where he stood, Armin could not hear her words, but he could see her body language. Her shoulders were tense, her free hand pressed against her forehead. She spoke into the receiver with urgency, her lips moving quickly, her expression shifting between fear and determination. He considered leaving her alone, but just as that thought came, she slammed the receiver down, her face pale with frustration. She pushed the booth door open and stepped out, nearly colliding with a passerby. Without looking around, she began walking briskly toward the darker part of the street. Armin acted before thinking. He hurried after her, calling out softly, Wait. She stopped abruptly and turned around, her eyes wide with surprise. For a moment, he thought she might run, but then recognition flickered across her face. You again, she whispered. He nodded, trying to sound calm. Yes. Look, I don't mean to bother you. But it's late, and you seem like you need someone around. At least until you're safe. She stared at him, uncertain, as though she was weighing whether she could trust him. The silence stretched before she finally said, I shouldn't be here. I shouldn't even be talking to you. Then why are you? He asked gently. Her lips trembled, but she didn't answer. Instead, she hugged her bag closer and looked away. It was as if she wanted to say something but didn't know how. Seeing her struggle, Armin softened his tone. I'm not asking for anything. Just, maybe let me walk with you until you decide where you're going. You don't have to explain. The rain had started again, a fine mist falling over the street. She looked up at the dark sky, then back at him. After a long pause, she finally gave a small nod. They walked side by side, neither speaking for a while. The city noises filled the silence, distant horns, the dripping of water from roofs, the hum of street lamps. Finally, she sighed, as if releasing a heavy weight. That call I made earlier, she began, her voice low, it didn't go the way I hoped. I thought someone would help me. But I was wrong. Armin glanced at her but didn't interrupt. She continued slowly, choosing her words carefully. I can't go home right now. Not because I don't have one, but because I don't want to. I just needed to hear a voice that could give me strength. Instead, all I got were more questions, more demands. So I ended it before they could convince me to return. Armin felt a knot of sympathy form in his chest. He wanted to ask her why, what she was running from, but he reminded himself not to push too hard. Instead, he said, sometimes people can't understand what you're going through. That doesn't mean you're wrong. It just means they see things differently. She looked at him for the first time with eyes that were less guarded. You talk like you know. He smiled faintly. Maybe I do. Or maybe I've just had my own share of days when I felt no one understood me. Her lips curved into the faintest smile, and for the first time, she looked less like a frightened stranger and more like someone who wanted to trust. They reached another small tea stall, this one quieter than the last. Without asking, Armin bought 2 cups again, and they sat under the awning, sheltered from the rain. The warmth of the tea seemed to ease the chill in the air. After a sip, she finally spoke more freely. My name is Alina, she said softly, as if testing whether it was safe to reveal it. I don't usually tell strangers my name, but you don't feel like a stranger anymore. Armin nodded respectfully. Alina. That's a beautiful name. Her eyes dropped to her cup, and she fiddled with the rim nervously. I'm not just some girl running away from home. My life is complicated. Too complicated. And I don't expect you to understand if I tell you. But believe me, if people knew where I was right now, they'd be searching every corner of the city. Her words puzzled him, but he remained calm. I don't need to know the details. What matters is that you feel safe. Do you have anywhere to stay tonight? She shook her head slowly. Not really. I was hoping I could figure it out before it got too late. Armin thought for a moment. He knew taking responsibility for her could be risky, but leaving her alone in the middle of the night didn't sit right with him. I have a friend who runs a small hostel nearby. It's simple, nothing fancy, but safe. If you want, I can ask him to let you stay there for the night. Her eyes widened in surprise. You'd do that for me? After just meeting me? He smiled gently. Sometimes strangers care more than the people you've known for years. She went silent at that, her gaze thoughtful. Perhaps his words touched something inside her. They finished their tea, and as they stood to leave, she whispered, "Thank you, Armin. I don't know why, but I feel like I can breathe a little easier with you around." He simply nodded, knowing that tonight was not the night for questions but for quiet support. He walked with her through the narrow lanes, the rain misting around them, guiding her toward the small hostel where she could finally rest. Armin had no idea yet who Alina truly was, or how deeply her story would connect with his own life. All he knew was that something about her call, her secrecy, and her sadness carried a mystery far beyond what he could imagine. And as the city lights shimmered through the drizzle, he realized that their paths had crossed for a reason he could not yet understand. The hostel was a modest building tucked away in a quiet lane, its entrance marked by a small wooden board that swayed gently in the night air. The paint was fading, and the lights above the door flickered, but inside it held a warmth that the outside world often lacked. Armin knocked on the door, and soon a middle-aged man with kind eyes opened it. His name was Farouk, an old friend of Armin's who had always been willing to help those in need. "Armin, this is a surprise," Farouk said with a smile. Then his eyes shifted to Alina, who stood slightly behind, clutching her bag nervously. Armin spoke quickly. "Farouk, this is a friend. She needs a safe place for the night. Could you help?" Farouk didn't ask questions. He simply nodded, stepping aside to let them in. "Of course. There's always a corner for someone who needs it." Alina exhaled, as if she had been holding her breath the entire walk. The tension in her shoulders eased just a little as she stepped inside. The hostel was simple, with wooden furniture, soft lights, and the faint smell of freshly cooked food lingering in the air. It wasn't luxury, but it felt safe. Farouk prepared a small room for her, and once everything was settled, Armin turned to leave. But Alina stopped him. "Wait," she said softly. Will you stay for a few minutes? Just until I feel settled." Armin hesitated, then nodded. They sat on two wooden chairs by the window. The rain outside had slowed, leaving behind a calm silence. For a while, neither of them spoke. It was Alina who finally broke the quiet. "I should tell you something," she said, her eyes fixed on the floor. "Because if I don't, it will feel unfair. You've been kind to me, and you don't even know who I am." Armin leaned forward slightly, listening but not pressuring her. "You don't have to tell me anything if you're not ready." She shook her head. "No, I want to. I can't keep hiding." Her fingers tightened around the strap of her bag. "My name is Alina Khan. My father is Asfand Khan, maybe you've heard of him." The name struck Armin instantly. Asfand Khan was one of the wealthiest businessmen in the country. His face appeared often in newspapers and on television, a man known for his empire of hotels, properties, and international deals. He was powerful, respected, even feared in some circles. Armin's eyes widened slightly. "You mean, you're his daughter?" Alina nodded slowly. "Yes. I'm the only child. Everyone thinks that means I live a perfect life, money, comfort, attention. But they don't know what it feels like to be trapped in it. Every step I take is decided for me. Every choice I try to make is corrected. I can't go anywhere without guards, without someone reporting back to my father. It's like living in a cage that looks beautiful from the outside but suffocates from the inside." Her voice shook as she spoke, but there was strength too, the strength of someone finally letting out years of hidden pain. Armin listened quietly, his heart heavy with sympathy. He had grown up in a modest family, working hard for every small comfort. To him, wealth had always seemed like a dream, but hearing her words made him realize how different reality could be. "I didn't run away because I hate my father," Alina continued. "I ran because I wanted him to see me as a person, not a possession. I wanted to breathe, to live even a single day without cameras, guards, or decisions made for me. I just wanted to know what it feels like to be normal. Her eyes shimmered with unshed tears, and she looked at him as if begging him to understand. Armin nodded slowly. It sounds lonely. To have everything but not the freedom to enjoy it? She gave a small, sad smile. Exactly. And when I borrowed your phone earlier, I wasn't calling a friend. I was calling someone from my family. I thought maybe they'd listen. Instead, they demanded to know where I was, told me to stop being foolish, and warned me of the trouble I was causing. They didn't hear me. They never do. Armin felt a pang in his chest. He could imagine the weight of living under constant control, where love was hidden behind power and expectations. That must have hurt, he said softly. Alina looked out the window at the wet streets glistening under the streetlights. It did. But it also made me stronger. I realized I can't wait for them to understand me. I have to understand myself first. The room fell into silence again, but this time it was not heavy. It was the kind of silence that comes after sharing something important, something that binds two people closer. Armin finally stood, sensing she needed rest. You should sleep. Tomorrow will be a new day, and maybe things will feel clearer. Alina nodded, gratitude shining in her eyes. Thank you, Armin. You didn't have to stay. You didn't have to listen. But you did. That means more than you know. He smiled faintly. Sometimes all a person needs is someone to listen. Good night, Alina. As he left the hostel and stepped back into the quiet night, Armin's thoughts were filled with her words. A runaway heiress, hiding in the shadows of the city, just to taste freedom. It was something he never would have imagined, yet now it was part of his life. The following morning, he returned to check on her. She was already awake, dressed simply, her hair tied back, looking less like the daughter of a tycoon and more like an ordinary girl preparing for an ordinary day. She greeted him with a smile that carried both relief and determination. I don't know what I'll do next, she admitted as they walked outside together. But I know I don't want to go back yet. Not until I've seen the world with my own eyes, not through the tinted glass of a car window or the gates of a mansion. Armin admired her courage. He knew the risks she was taking. Her family would surely be searching for her, the media might soon pick up the story, and the city was not always kind to those unprepared for its rough edges. Yet, in her eyes, he saw a spark that convinced him she was ready to fight for her freedom. And though he barely knew her, he also knew he couldn't just walk away now. Something inside him told him their paths had crossed for a reason, and he would stay by her side, at least until she no longer needed him. As they walked into the bustling streets, blending with the ordinary crowd, Alina looked around with wonder. Every vendor's call, every bus rushing by, every child laughing on the corner, it all felt new to her, as if she was seeing the world for the first time. Armin watched her carefully, realizing that this journey was only beginning. The days that followed felt unlike anything Alina had ever experienced. For the first time in her life, she woke up without a schedule written for her, without a maid pulling open the curtains, without guards waiting outside her door. She woke up in a small room at Farouk's hostel, the morning light slipping in through the thin curtains, and she felt strangely free. It wasn't the comfort she had been used to, but it was hers. Armin came by every morning before heading to his office. He always carried 2 cups of tea, one for himself and one for her, and sometimes brought along fresh bread or fruit from the street vendors. At first, Alina had felt guilty accepting his help, but he brushed off her concerns with a warm smile. It's nothing, he would say. Everyone deserves breakfast. One morning, as they sat on the hostel steps, watching people hurry past on their way to work, Alina turned to him and said, "You know, I've lived in this city all my life, but I've never really seen it. All I saw were tall buildings and luxury cars. But this feels real." Armin sipped his tea and chuckled. The real city is in the small things like the vendor who knows your order before you speak, or the bus conductor who lets kids ride for free, or the way neighbors share food in the evening. You don't see those things when you live behind walls. Her eyes sparkled with curiosity. Then show me. Show me everything I've missed. From that day on, whenever Armin had free time, he became her quiet guide. They boarded crowded buses where Alina had to squeeze between strangers, clutching the metal rail as the bus jolted forward. At first, she looked uncomfortable, but soon she laughed as the bus rocked, finding it thrilling in a way no luxury car ride had ever been. They wandered through markets buzzing with life. Alina's eyes widened at the rows of colorful fabrics, the smell of roasted corn, the calls of vendors trying to sell their goods. She stopped at one stall selling handmade bracelets and spent minutes choosing one. When Armin teased her for taking so long, she replied, smiling, "This may be the first thing I've ever bought with my own choice, with my own money." She slipped the bracelet on her wrist like it was a crown. Street food became another adventure. Alina tried spicy samosas, sweet jalebis, and roasted chestnuts, often giggling when the flavors surprised her. "I've eaten in the finest restaurants," she admitted once, licking sugar from her fingers, "but nothing ever tasted as alive as this." Armin watched her with quiet amusement. For him, these were ordinary things, but through her eyes, they became extraordinary. He realized that freedom wasn't just about escaping walls, it was about discovering joy in the simplest of experiences. Over time, their conversations grew deeper. Alina shared more about her life, her memories of being followed by cameras, her longing to study art instead of business, her loneliness even in a house filled with people. Armin shared his own struggles, how he had worked hard to support his younger siblings after their father's passing, how he often felt invisible in the city's race for success, and how small acts of kindness had kept him going. One evening, as the sun set and the sky turned orange, they sat by the riverbank, watching boats drift slowly across the water. Alina picked up a stone and tossed it, watching the ripples spread. "Do you ever feel," she asked softly, "that your life is meant to be more than what it is? Like there's something waiting for you, but you don't know what?" Armin thought for a moment. "Yes. Many times. But I've learned that sometimes the answer isn't far away. Sometimes it's hidden in the choices we make every day. Like choosing to stop when you see someone crying, instead of walking past." Alina looked at him then, her expression tender. "You don't know how much that moment meant to me. If you hadn't lent me your phone, if you hadn't stayed, I don't know where I would be." Armin smiled, but inside, he felt a warmth he couldn't explain. He had not planned to be part of her journey, yet here he was, walking beside her, watching her transform from a frightened runaway into a girl who laughed freely and looked at the world with wonder. But even as their bond deepened, there was always a shadow. News about her disappearance had spread. Newspapers carried her father's pleas, and television channels showed footage of security teams searching. Whenever Alina saw the headlines, her face grew tense, and she avoided looking too long. "They'll find me eventually," she admitted one night. "But I'm not ready yet. Not until I know who I am outside their world." Armin worried for her safety, but he respected her wishes. He kept her secret, even from most of his friends, knowing that trust was the greatest gift he could offer. One afternoon, as they strolled through a park, Alina stopped by a group of children drawing with chalk on the pavement. She knelt beside them, laughing as they handed her pieces of chalk, and she began sketching simple flowers and houses. Her face glowed with happiness, and for a moment, she looked like an ordinary girl with no burdens at all. When she stood, wiping the chalk dust from her hands, she turned to Armin and said, "This is what I want. Not the drawings, but the freedom to choose what makes me happy. Even if it's as small as chalk on the ground." Armin looked at her, realizing more than ever that her fight was not against her father's wealth but against the cage it had built around her spirit. As days turned into weeks, their companionship grew unspokenly close. They didn't need to say much, their shared silences spoke louder than words. Alina found comfort in Armin's calm presence, and Armin found inspiration in Alina's courage to chase freedom despite the risks. But both of them knew that this couldn't last forever. There would come a day when Alina would have to face her world again, and when that day arrived, their lives might return to separate paths. Yet neither of them spoke of it. Instead, they chose to live in the present, cherishing each moment as if it was a gift. One night, as they walked back to the hostel under the glow of streetlights, Alina stopped suddenly. "Promise me something," she said, her voice serious. Armin turned to her. "What is it?" "Promise me that no matter what happens later, you'll remember me not as the heiress everyone talks about, but as the girl you saw in the subway, crying with a bag in her hands." Armin's gaze softened. "I promise," he said simply. She smiled, and for the first time, her eyes shone not with fear or sadness, but with a quiet peace. Neither of them knew what the future held, but in that moment, they both understood that their lives had changed forever. The morning felt different, heavier, as though the city itself was holding its breath. Armin noticed it the moment he stepped outside the hostel to buy tea. The newspapers at the corner stall carried a photo on the front page, a smiling Alina beside her father, the headline bold and urgent: "Heiress missing, search intensifies." Armin folded the paper quickly before Alina could see it. But when he returned, she was already sitting by the window in the hostel room, her phone in her lap. Somehow, she had seen the news on a television in the lobby. Her face was pale, her eyes distant. "They know I'm here," she whispered when he entered. "Maybe not this exact place, but they're close." Armin set the tea down, unsure of what to say. He had known this moment would come. The city was too small to hide someone like her for long. She looked at him with a mixture of fear and resolve. "I don't regret running away. These days I've lived have been the happiest I can remember. But now I have to face it. I can't keep hiding forever." Armin sat opposite her, his voice gentle. "You don't have to decide today. You still have time. Maybe we can think of another way." But Alina shook her head. "No. The longer I stay away, the more worried my father will become. The media will twist everything, and people will think I was kidnapped or harmed. I don't want him to live with that fear, even if we don't agree on everything." There was silence between them, heavy with the weight of unspoken emotions. Armin finally asked, "Do you want me to go with you?" Her eyes softened, and for the first time since he had met her, she reached across the table and held his hand. "Yes. I don't think I could do this alone." That evening, they left the hostel together. The sky was painted in shades of pink and gold, the city alive with its usual noise, but for both of them, every step felt like the closing of a chapter. Alina wore simple clothes, her hair tied back, yet her presence still carried a quiet grace that made people glance twice. Armin walked beside her, steady and calm, his heart heavier with each step. They reached the gates of a grand mansion, guarded and towering, the complete opposite of the small hostel where she had found peace. Reporters crowded outside, cameras flashing, voices shouting questions. The moment Alina stepped into view, the chaos grew louder. Security pushed people back as the gates opened. Her father stood in the driveway, surrounded by men in suits, his face etched with worry and exhaustion. The moment his eyes landed on her, something shifted. He rushed forward, his sternness breaking into raw relief. "Alina," he cried, pulling her into his arms. "Thank God, you're safe." Tears filled her eyes as she hugged him back, but she didn't let herself be silenced this time. "I'm safe, Baba. But not because of guards or gates. Because someone cared for me when I was just a girl on a bench, crying in a subway." She turned slightly, her gaze finding Armin, who stood quietly a few steps away. Her father followed her eyes, and for the first time, he noticed Armin. His brows furrowed as though trying to place him, but Alina quickly spoke again. He helped me. He treated me like a person, not an heiress. If not for him, I don't know what would have happened. Please, don't see him as a stranger. He is the reason I came back safely. Armin bowed his head respectfully, not seeking credit, only hoping to slip away quietly. But Alina's hand tightened around his before he could move. She wasn't finished. Baba, she said firmly, her voice shaking yet strong, I can't live like before. I can't be locked away and told what to do. I need freedom, even if it scares you. I need to choose my own path, make my own mistakes, and discover who I am outside of your shadow. Her father's eyes glistened with unshed tears. The powerful businessman looked suddenly older, more human. He had always believed he was protecting her by controlling her life, but now, faced with her raw honesty, he realized he had been pushing her away. For a long moment, he said nothing. Then, with a deep breath, he whispered, You are my daughter, Alina. Everything I've done was because I love you. But maybe I forgot that love means listening too. His voice cracked slightly. I don't want to lose you again. So if freedom is what you need, I will try to give it. Alina's tears flowed freely now, but they were tears of relief. She hugged her father again, this time with peace in her heart. The walls of misunderstanding between them had finally begun to crumble. Reporters shouted, cameras flashed, and the world outside the gates continued to buzz with questions. But in that small circle of father, daughter, and the young man who had bridged their worlds, there was only silence and understanding. Later, when the commotion settled and Alina was safe inside, Armin prepared to leave quietly. He had done his part. This was her world, not his. But before he could step out of the gates, Alina came running after him. Armin, she called, breathless. He turned, surprised. She looked at him with gratitude that words could barely hold. I don't know what tomorrow will bring. My life will never be simple. But I want you to know this: you gave me something I thought I'd lost forever. You made me feel seen. You reminded me that kindness still exists. Armin smiled faintly. And you reminded me that even small acts can change a life. They stood in silence for a moment, the city's noise fading behind them. Finally, she said, promise me you won't disappear. Even if we don't see each other often, I want to know that somewhere out there, you're still the same person who stopped for a stranger in the subway. I promise, he said simply. She smiled, a smile that carried hope and strength, and then she returned to her world. Armin walked away into the night, his steps steady, his heart strangely full. He knew their lives might never cross in the same way again. But he also knew that what they shared would remain forever: two souls who had met by chance on a rainy evening, and changed each other's worlds. And whenever he passed the subway station, he couldn't help but glance at the old bench where he had first seen her. It reminded him that kindness, even in the smallest of moments, had the power to shape destinies. The story of the runaway heiress and the ordinary man was no longer just theirs. It was a reminder that behind every stranger's tears, there might be a story waiting for a simple act of humanity to unfold.